welcome to Aura Talks.
So, Irene, I think we should definitely have a follow-up episode once it's launched, and we're obviously we have a current functional platform that we're going to announce again at the end of this week. But I have actually a very good app development team that we're working on to do a new and improved, more user-friendly and user interactive platform. So I'm really grateful because my last this is the power of Aura Talks. So last episode, Andres, a dear friend of mine from high school who is an excellent software engineer, he came on and he was quite inspired and moved by the Aura platform. And I hadn't really talked to him a lot about it, but I told him just the detail. I wanted the conversation to flow naturally, especially on Aura Talks. So we just got to it. But by the end of it, he was really moved. And funny enough, today it's been confirmed he's joining the app development team.
Yeah. No way! What?
Yes, the power of Aura Talks.
That's amazing.
So the next thing you know, Ayesha and Cecilia will be the poster children for for the Aura platform. But you guys, let me just take it back again to the basic and simple. So what I do think I'm very grateful for is having had a relatively simple life in Auroville. And what I mean by simple in this context is being immersed in nature and also not having so much to do with like gadgets and like, having a flat screen TV. And it would be a lie to say we didn't have like phones, because we did, but we didn't interact. We didn't rely on these devices as much as maybe other kids around the world.
But it was like a Nokia with a torchlight. So the most I used it is at night to like open my cycle lock or something.
Exactly.
We used landlines for most, like while I was like, until like I was much older, I was using landlines. I mean, I used to call Cecilia.
Landlines! But what's funny, Ayesha, you mentioned this in our last conversation, is that yes, we had a relatively simple life, but at the same time, we also had help in the house, especially us three. We are definitely belong to the privileged part of the community, and we had help, which in other parts of the world is considered, it's kind of frowned upon a little bit, and it's also it's perceived to be extremely luxurious. For anyone to afford help in Germany, they have to be a millionaire and more, right? Yeah. So what I want to ask both of you is, do you feel like you have changed a lot in that regard since living in more modern urban parts of the world? Let me be more specific. Do you feel like you have more materialistic desires ever since leaving Auroville? I think, Cec, you touched upon this a little bit before, but you want to elaborate?
Yeah, the beauty of Auroville is that when you're living there, at least for me, I feel like I need nothing. I feel like I have everything I need and want, and I just feel excited. And I think this proves the fact that as human beings, we're very simple. And if we get bombarded on an everyday basis with new shoes, new this, new that, new this, then automatically you're going to want it. But if you live in a place without these bombardments, you are very, we're simple. We don't need much. If we have, like, all I need in Auroville are a t-shirt, like an oversized t-shirt, some shorts, and chappals. Like flip-flops. Yeah. And I'm happy. And I never order on Amazon when I'm in Auroville. So yes, that's one of the beauties of Auroville. For me, at least. Again, I repeat, like, it's important to know, like, if I lived in Auroville today, now, maybe I would be ordering more on Amazon. But when I go visit for 2 months, like, I don't feel that need at all. And actually, I really have started to go on a minimalistic venture, because since I left Auroville, I started accumulating things, and I was like, I wanted to buy a plant. And in Auroville, I would never buy a plant. You would like either take it from the garden, or like there are plants everywhere. But in a city, I spend the most money ever is on plants and candles, always. And and I kept moving city, and I kept moving apartments, so I kept having to rebuy all these things, and I realized it was so unsustainable. And now I've decided to go on a way more minimalistic approach to life, and really, really ask myself, where does this come from? And kind of start approaching like a slow life mentality, like slow fashion, slow food. And I'm feeling so much better. And this is, again, thanks to... Oh, thanks. This is, again, thanks to the quarantine. It's made me reflect so much on my needs, on my basic needs. what do I need? And the only thing I'm spending on right now is food. And I've invested more money in food and less money in everything else. So I might get like sourdough bread that's really good and from a really good bakery, but I might not buy shoes that I thought I needed when I worked in a corporate, which I don't anymore, thank God. So I don't even have that pressure anymore. Or makeup. When I moved to a city, I felt pressure to wear makeup. Everybody wears makeup. And I felt like I had to. And only now I'm starting to feel comfortable not to wear it and stop wearing it completely. But it took me a while to readjust, because you get bombarded into this like world that you're like, whoa, what's happening? I never owned this. I never had this. Like I never put blush on. What is blush?
Yeah.
And these are things that for people growing up in cities are very normal, right? Because
yes,
it's absolutely normal. So there's definitely a big adjustment to make. And then it's beautiful to watch how, starting from zero, I went up and I started being bombarded by all these things, and now I want to go back to zero and live very simply. And I thought I could only be like that when I was in Auroville, but I'm learning that I can live my life however I want to anywhere else in the world, and keep Auroville in my heart. And so it's made me feel a lot better, because I kept living and missing it. This is another curse of Auroville, is that when you're there, you want to travel, and when you're traveling or when you're somewhere else, you want to be there. So you're constantly like never really happy with where you are. And I think once I realized it, I made a conscious effort to just be happy and grateful where I am, and be happy and grateful for all the things I carry inside of me.
Yeah.
So
thank you for sharing, Sas. I really resonated with a lot of what you said. And I'm so grateful for, it sounds so strange to be grateful for a tragedy, especially when it's a global tragedy, that like there are people who are really suffering, and there are people that are so anxious and so uncertain about their future. But what I'm personally grateful for is the time out that I've had, also to reflect on my own basic needs and what type of life I would like to lead, and at which pace I would like to continue my life. Because I'm such an energetic person, and I do consider myself, let's say, compared to an average person, on like a bit more ambitious, let's say, hashtag workaholic tendencies. I really had, this time out has given me a lot of perspective, and what pace is actually natural for the soul. But with that said, Ayesha, I would really love to hear also more of your perspectives on, also, have you gone through a similar process that Seth described, in terms of also this movement of like reaching a peak of, let's say, consumerism and materialistic desires, and having a plateau?
I think a lot of what Seth said is really interesting. From my understanding, what she's saying, and I completely agree with it, is that in Auroville, because there is abundance, you don't have a materialistic mindset. And when you're outside of Auroville, because it's harder to, in Auroville, you go to Solar Kitchen and I can get a papaya juice for, something that I can afford. But in abroad, like, that's not something I can afford every day, you know? And so I think Auroville just makes these beautiful, really wonderful elements of our lives like accessible, and so you don't have to crave it all the time. And yeah, I mean, I think though, definitely I did sense that, like, living abroad, I did notice myself like craving maybe more materialistic things, using Amazon. But at the same time, I always feel like, I have less than I do when I'm in Auroville. And I think that's because in Auroville, yes, we have people to help us in the home, someone to help cook you a wonderful meal, and things like that, which are just an automatic part of like living in Auroville, or living in, not automatic, I wouldn't say that, but for me it was living in Auroville or living in India. It is sort of something that we were blessed with growing up, and just like access to things like, restaurants with really healthy food at a reasonable rate, things like that. So it's hard to say which one is more materialistic to me, because in a way, like, you have more when you're in Auroville, but then when you're abroad, you're kind of craving it more, and you're craving, and I guess definitely things like fashion, like makeup and like the latest designer shoes and things like that. That's something I don't think about when I'm in Auroville at all. I don't think about that much when I'm abroad either. But I mean, I'm happy with, I have my own approach to fashion, but I don't need like the most expensive shoes or the most expensive designer bag or anything. And I think that's definitely a lot because of what Auroville ingrained in me, growing up. But yeah, so it's for me, it's kind of a mixed answer, I guess.
Wow, this is really interesting. Again, an insightful perspective, because I mean, of course, I'm completely paraphrasing from what I understood, but in a way, because we also have certain things that like more in abundance, let's say even help in the house and let's say access to healthy food, we had less desire. I want to kind of share a very an insight that popped into my head once after this conversation was, I think being simple, like again, being free of materialistic desires, it requires two things. It requires that the society that you're a part of does not exert pressure on you to meet up to certain expectations. I mean, now I'm going to bring up the topic that Cess mentioned, like working for a corporation, you are expected to dress a certain way. I also felt this when I was interviewing for Allianz, and I dressed a certain way because I had to meet up to that dress code, right? And of course, in Korea, I think anyone who's watching this from Korea would agree that there is so much pressure, especially for women, to be aesthetically pleasing to like the public eye. And the extent that people go to like fulfill that expectation, it gives into your materialistic desires. Almost like there is this expectation and you don't think it's a desire, you think it's a need, because there is this societal expectation, and it's not a desire anymore because it's a fundamental need to fulfill that expectation. So yes. I think maybe also in Auroville, we didn't have them. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, we didn't have as much of that societal pressure. So maybe it wasn't to that extent a bit easier for us to live simple lives. But more so than that, getting to the, let's say, the simple definition of being less materialistically driven, the Aura platform, like the key word to Aura platform is circulation, recirculation. So when you never know what's in the shed or on the shelves of other people, right? There's so many things I genuinely don't need, whether I got it from people as presents or I bought it myself out of stupidity. For example, I love listening to music. So I have 3 headsets, 2 of them I got as presents, and I would be more than happy to give these away because I have 1 headset that I use on a daily basis.
I need one, Dumby.
Okay, I'll definitely give.
Aura is that?
I'll put it up on the Aura platform, so you guys definitely have to join. But my point is, again, I think you will by default live a more simple life when there are things in circulation, when you're sharing more with others what you already have. So I really hope that the Aura platform will not only encourage this simple way of life, but also the basic way of life, whereby you can learn to be more connected to nature, where you can learn to plant, where you can learn to grow. So that's really my hope.
And just to like ground this idea, like one of my favorite things of Auroville is the free store. The free store is amazing. Like it just works so beautifully. Like there's so much sharing and recirculating. So I think that is like a tiny example that shows you how well it's working. And or the Aura, your Aura platform is like the free store times 1,000. You know. Which already shows you how it could work so well in a community that is willing to share and willing to recycle and reuse and just be more sustainable overall, I think.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, getting back to the topic of COVID-19 and the impact that it has had on our perception of reality, for me personally, the world kind of slowing down on a global level, and me, in addition, being a part of a very collectively driven project such as the Aura project, it has confronted me with certain harsh truths. For example, that society encourages and validates egocentric and individualistic behavior. And of course, this is a generalization, but like, I think we all can agree that we've definitely felt that, we're like, okay, if you focus on your future more, you're going to be rewarded more, right? So I found myself asking, okay, how can I give back? How can I give more than I take? And also, again, relating to what Cess said beautifully the other day, you need to also give back to nature and not always take from nature. And of course, nobody's going to refute that one of the most global crises right now is environment. Like, how is our environment going to sustain itself or survive at this rate, right? So what I wanted to ask you both, do you think that Auroville, being this very collective, very idealistic society and community, are we as egocentric and individualistic as the rest of the world deep down, or have we taken a step more towards our vision? And please be honest here, because I really would like to know what your thoughts are on this.
Ayesha, go for it.
Oh, Sas, you go for it.
Okay,
I think they're both a little scared to get into some muddy waters.
I think that it's a hard question, because in Auroville we are all, I think we have an elevated consciousness. So we start off from a consciousness that's above the general consciousness of the world. So we are aware of, since we're young, we meditate before starting school. We love animals. We live with animals. We have geckos, frogs, snakes all over the place, and we're fine with it. So in a way, we already are integrated with nature. We understand nature. We are by that sense more altruistic, because we don't come before nature, you know. And I think tropical climates makes that very clear, because you will not be able to fight a monsoon. You will not be able to fight the frogs during the monsoon at night when they like make a concert. So in a very practical grounded terms, growing up in Auroville sets this foundation of living together with the world surrounding you. Okay, so you're not better, you're not above, you're just another element. There is nature, and then there is humans. However, I think sadly, as a community and the way the community functions, I think we have this weakness as humans of our ego. And it's our biggest weakness, and we can be very egocentric and self-driven, which can be, of course, a very positive thing, because being self-driven means that you work on yourself and you move forward. But then it can also be negative, because if you only focus on yourself, then you're not aware of what's around you. And I also think this is one of the issues that Auroville is currently facing and currently trying to address and understand, how we can, be more, move forward as a community rather than move forward each one of us on their own. And it's a struggle. It's a struggle because Auroville was founded many years ago with a very clear dream, a beautiful dream. But then realistically, when things move forward, things have to change. And now we're at that moment where the two generations are changing. So we as Auroville kids grow up in Auroville without having any savings or without having any money, for example. So if I was to move back to Auroville, my main focus would be, even though if I didn't want it to be, but it would be money. It would be finding a way to earn enough money. Yeah. And that's a very egoistic approach, especially if you move back to Auroville because you want to give back. But the way that Auroville is designed for this moment doesn't satisfy a lot of us economically. So like for me, living on a maintenance, I wouldn't feel comfortable. I would feel worried if anything was to happen, how am I going to like approach the outer world with my maintenance? Yeah. So this is just one example of how things are changing. And I think this is a debate that's coming up a lot in how to redesign the community, like as we go forward, as this new generation, like our generation that is coming up in Auroville to be able to live there and be 100% sustainable, and not only think about your future and your basic needs, like you said, but to think about the whole. And there are a lot of incredible examples of young people in Auroville that are managing, that have found their balance and ways. And I look up to them so much. And whenever I go back, I ask them questions. How do you do it? How do you find? So it is possible. It's super possible. And the beauty of it is that I find that our generation, everyone that goes back from our generation, does incredible things for the community. One example that I want to mention is tree care. Jonas, like he he left, got an amazing education. Then he wanted to go back to Auroville, and he didn't think about money. He didn't think about how I'm going to make this business sustainable, but he just from his heart wanted to work with trees. And he did it in such a beautiful way that it became an incredibly successful business. So I think ultimately, when you start from a place of love and not greed or ego, you will get everything that you want to get with your ego. So it will come, instead of wanting it, it'll just come to you.
Yes.
So yeah, so it's I said a lot. I don't know, Dom, if you want to paraphrase it.
No, beautifully said.
Yeah, I really love what you said, especially the last example you gave about like things coming from the heart and how that will naturally, attract the most wonderful things that you want in your life.
For sure. Actually, do you want to also elaborate on just what the question, if you forgot, because there was a lot said in between?
Sorry.
No, I think I got it. I think I understand what the question. I still remember it, but I think fundamentally, Auroville is like based on like giving and sharing, because everyone works as a volunteer within Auroville in some way, right? Like everyone has to give back to the community in some way. So I think that, growing up seeing that, for me, that was really inspiring, and that makes me want to like become a person who gives back to the community in some way. Like it's inspired me in that sense.
Yeah.
But I think, again, I'm going to go back to like the topic that we discussed earlier, which is that I think Auroville could be, in my opinion, more giving or more open to communities outside of Auroville. I know it's really hard. To maintain like the integrity of Auroville and what it means and the ideals of Auroville. And I realize that Auroville is becoming, more commercialized in some ways because there's, more tourists coming in and more. I get it, but I think that if people really put like the thought into how it could be done, like for example, perhaps you could have like I always thought this would be great, is if you had in high schools or in middle schools like an exchange program where a student could come from a city like Mumbai or Delhi or whatever, live in Auroville with a family, and an Aurovillian could experience living outside of Auroville in India and outside of Auroville, India, because Auroville is a very specific part of India, and I think
it's not like living in India. Yeah.
No, honestly, it's so false to say we live in India sometimes.
Yeah, but just to foster that exchange of thoughts and ideas, and so people can understand really like the country that they're living in, and so that kids living in like big cities can experience something as wonderful and unique as Auroville.
Yes. Well, I really, I'm so glad that you said that, Ayesha, because also one thing that I mentioned in our last conversation was I wish that we had more respect and appreciation and admiration for India, and the fact that India is the host to this wonderful project. Without India, I mean, there are so many countries in the world, but the country that chose to host and embrace Auroville as an idea, as an experiment, is India. And for that alone, I'll be forever grateful to India. And also just, I love Indians in general. Like I really love Indian culture. And funny enough, I learned more about Indian culture after I left. I'm talking about the history and more like even traditions, because I met a lot of Indian people in Canada, also in Germany. So I wish that also that's something that we can work on. And that, of course, in part can be done through what you also suggested, like fostering more exchange programs within India. And I really, really hope that's something that our generation and the coming generations are going to work on. Because I think, to be fair to the old timers, the pioneers of Auroville, they were so focused on building the community. I don't think they were thinking, how do we embrace India? They were so focused on that one goal, and they've done a great job. And now that we have that foundation, I think it's time for us to reach out to India and also embrace India. So I think we're at that stage. So thank you so much for bringing that up, because that's something that I'm very adamant about. I really would like that India, like India has India feels like Auroville is also accepting. You guys, I really want to ask, because we've been talking so much about Aura platform, but we're not done yet. We're going to split this into 2 episodes, I believe. What I would like to ask is, Aura platform is a sharing-based platform and not a consumption-based platform. And consumption is something that, as a word, of course, we can redefine the word, but consumption always has this connotation of like being a bit more mindless, you know, because you consume, right? You don't receive. Receive is like technically the same like act of consuming, but like consuming is more like you're grabbing out for it, I think. So I really do want to emphasize that Aura is a very sharing based app and co-creating. Just as I mentioned before, the success of the Aura platform will be strictly tied to how many people are willing to offer and how many people actually follow up on their offerings, right? So I want to ask you now, because we've talked about it, like we beat around the bush, what do you think are your personal opinions on the Aura platform in terms of how it might impact the community?
Mm-hmm.
Ayesha, go for it.
I think
the stage is yours.
Before, I think I touched on some of this before, but I wanted to talk about like the fact that I think it's wonderful that you can share things like, you know, you can share products, you can donate things, you can offer services like babysitting, you can offer services like tutoring, horse riding, surfing. All of those things just become more accessible. And so I think that's great, and that both the people who are creating the services or the products and the people who are gaining access to them, both people benefit. So I think that's really great. And of course, like the exchange of interactions, you're gonna get to know more people in the community. I think that's really wonderful, especially for people who are like newcomers or people who aren't fully integrated into the community yet.
Yeah, I feel like Ayesha has, just a success before I give the floor to you, Ayesha has become an expert on the subject, because I sent her a presentation that I did on the Aura project, and honestly her message which she sent me this morning made my day. I'm paraphrasing, I should read it out loud, but she said that I'm so proud of you, like honestly you spoke so eloquently and you really hit the right points. And she said that she really felt inspired. That was like the last sentiment that she shared. And it really meant the world to me, because first of all, it was a 50-minute presentation. When I sent it to some of my other friends, they're like, oh my God, this is so...
No, I thought that too, but then I started watching it and I got really sucked in. And Dunby is a very entertaining speaker. Like she's just, and of course, like, you know, I love her. You know?
Thank you so much. Honestly, this is
like watching you talk so like eloquently and having like just such wonderful points to make. Like it just, I don't know. I guess I wanted to watch it because I was just also proud of you. And I don't know, there's a number of different things, but I think you've talked about, you know, universal basic income as a topic between our conversations casually many times. And I sort of understood the basic concepts, but then watching you speak, it really helped me really get to wrap my head around it and to think about it more deeply and to think about its connection to Auroville. And so I think it's a wonderful talk. I really, really advise everyone who's watching this, if you're interested in that, to check it out. Really, I mean it.
Honestly, but I think my unconscious, like my subconscious is, my plan is to basically convert all my friends in my inner circle to Aura advocates, and I'm not even doing it intentionally, but deep inside, I'm like, ooh, to become an advocate for us. But
just put it on the show notes.
Yes, I'll put a link in the description.
I have a question. Yes. That just came to mind. So. What about like if you're like me, for example, no? Yes. I grew up in Auroville and I go back to Auroville back and forth, and I would be part of this Aura app. Yes. What if I then leave and I live most of my time in LA? Will I still be a part of it, or will I only have access to it when I go back to Auroville?
I think this is a really fantastic question, Sas. So of course, at the moment, for the time being, we're targeting community members. I mean, in-house or out-house, I mean, in the community or out abroad right now, because of course we want to get a really strong user base. But one thing that COVID-19 has taught us is also the power of digitalization and how you can still offer and be of assistance and support to others on Zoom or on Skype or so many other digital platforms, right? So if you ever feel like you want to share, because you are an integral, each and every single one of us on this talk or watching Aura Talks, supporting us, I feel like is an integral member of the community, can obviously offer. So I don't think like we're going to like restrict, how do you say, the access to the platform or just to people who are residents right now, because of course there are going to be certain offerings that really require physical interactions, and that's what we're obviously promoting. So does that answer your question, Saz?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I was just thinking about it now from a completely different point of view. And I was like, how cool would it be to like, sometimes living abroad, I would like to know more of what's happening in the community. And yeah, there's notes and there's like AuraNet, but like something more accessible, like on my phone, and just being like, oh, that's so cool. I don't know, Dumby's giving a talk on sustainability at Future School tomorrow. Like, oh, that's fun, you know? So yeah, I just thought it was a really fun and nice way to keep everything connected. And like maybe there are people that are abroad doing incredible things that could, I don't know, like offer Zoom sessions on these topics. And recently I have been invited to this women share group on WhatsApp, which a friend of mine created. And it's just been great because it's just a bunch of women around the world that have been invited. And each one of us lives in different countries. Each one of us has a different skill, and we meet weekly and we all share different skills. And I've learned so much about random topics. And I think this is something that the Aura, I just connected them right now. And I was like, oh, it would be so incredible if the Aura platform can allow, like in a way, I don't know how it would be designed. I can't envision it exactly, but like allow spaces, like weekly spaces where Zoom openings could be open and people can volunteer to give talks on specific topics. And it can be done in person or it can be done on Zoom. And it's on volunteer basis. And and this is the beauty.
Look at you with ideas.
I mean, honestly, like, you know, I might have sounded a little negative on it before, but it's just about opening Auroville to technology that I'm like kind of scared about. But I think this in general is such an incredible opportunity to share. Like we all have things to give that are our hobbies, our jobs, and we want to share with the world. And we often don't. Like for example, Ayesha, she just finished this incredible course on nutrition, and like, you know, I would like to know more about it, and she could put it up, and like a lot of people want to know more about nutrition. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just a way to share things. Or Dumby, you in technology, like you know so much about technology and I feel like I know nothing. So looking at it from this perspective makes me so much more excited, because I'm like, wow, it's there's so much knowledge everywhere, and let's make it accessible. So suddenly got really excited, Dumby.
Like I find excitement and love and support so contagious on it.
What I think would be nice is also sharing, like people could offer like their stories or you know, just knowledge on Auroville and Auroville philosophy, because I mean that's not something that's a huge focus in the schools, but it's still something that I would have loved to like have engaged in more growing up in Auroville, and especially coming back to Auroville and kind of wanting to stay connected with Auroville and understanding what Auroville was really, the ideals that Auroville was really founded on. I think having, you know, group shares on that would be something wonderful too.
I fully agree.
Wow, that sounds, you guys already like the ideas are flowing. That's when the conversations are just right. I really want to comment on what Seth said about just, you know, the things that you could put on this platform. I really want to take a couple of minutes of this talk to really talk about how much I admire you both. You know, what's interesting also about this Aura platform is that there needs to be some self-introspection to ask the question, what can I offer? Would it be like my technical expertise? Would it be my love and passion for public speaking? Although I have a long way to go, I really love public speaking and I do see it as a tool. It's obviously like communication is a way also like people shape their opinions or like convey their opinions. And I do believe that this is something that can be not taught necessarily, but like so to speak is training and conditioning too, right? Just because you've always had fear of public speaking doesn't mean that by the 10th time that fear will still persist. So my point is, through this project, I also have to ask myself, oh, okay, it's easy to like preach it to people. Oh, offer, but Dumby, what are you going to offer? So just now talking about what you could potentially offer, of course, please feel free to elaborate. She's like, oh, tell me.
Yeah, I want to know, like, I mean, I love these things because even though like you're my best friend, like there's so many things like that I want to learn about.
So what I'll say is for Ayesha and Cec, they are such incredible listeners and such, wow, just they're the two people in my life. If I need support, I just reach out to them, you know, and I'm quite an independent person. I try to stand on my two own feet and not seek out help, but to them, I could always refer to. But okay, just in terms of what I believe, like Cec, you could offer on the platform is it's kind of like a little plug for you, but Cec recently completed a course in sound healing and also chakra healing. So for those of you not familiar, please look it up. It's like, I would say, please correct me if I'm wrong, Cec, but like definitely some ancient traditions that have been very prevalent in India, and I'm really glad that you got that training, because there is a danger in like entering the healing world without a journey and without learning from the right people and the masters. So you did that, and I've heard some birds told me that it's been really great. I've heard some rave reviews. I mean, I'm talking about, wow, this is like, I've never felt so good in my life. That is a quote. It's not a paraphrase. So Cec, for example, that's something that you could definitely offer on this platform, and everyone would be so lucky for you to have a session with you, or to even learn more about what that is, what healing is, and also how to take better care of your mental health, your spiritual health, emotional health, because we forget that there's something beyond physical health, right? So that's something that what you could to offer. And
yeah.
In the case of Ayesha, please, you guys, elaborate on what you could offer after what I finished. But Ayesha, you also have like completed quite an extensive and demanding course in health and wellness, and also taking care of different parts of your bodies or different forms of health, like the ones I mentioned: emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual too. And I think honestly, I've had such wonderful conversations with Ayesha this year alone, in terms of like, okay, she's given me a deep breathing exercise. So Ujjayi breath, and I mean, I told Ayesha, I'm like, Ayesha, I'm feeling things in my chest that I've never felt before, these vibrations that are so beautiful. And I always have such wonderful, fruitful conversations about what nutrition is, what to eat. So I think, Ayesha, you'd be perfect also offering those, because you also do it in such a way that's approachable. Because what often I see online is someone looks so healthy or so perfect that you're like, I can't be that person. But the way you approach people and the way you explain things, you really break it down and you kind of humanize it as opposed to superhero it. So I really appreciate that, the ability that you both have to do that with what you're passionate about. And this again really ties into what I asked earlier about self-introduction. I asked you guys, okay, what's your current focus in life? And that's definitely what's, so to speak, driving you in your respective lives right now.
I just want to conclude by saying that you're always on avant-garde, like trying to find new technologies, and now we're talking about an app and experimenting this app in a community. But like, I would like to dream big and think the world needs a different economy. I cannot wait for the day that the economy completely crashes, so that we're forced to rebuild it from scratch. And Dambi, you will be out there, you will have had so much, experience and knowledge in this topic, and I hope that when that day happens, you can be like, I have the solution.
Thank you. Definitely. Yeah. I think it's really important to zoom out, and I would really like to conclude this episode. I really like to conclude each episode with sharing certain gratitude. And for me personally, you guys represent home for me. Honestly, I've always struggled in my life to understand what home is. Is it like a physical location? Is it tied to, is it geography? Is it a feeling? Is it the people? I've gone through a whole process with defining what home is. But for the time being, I've come to the conclusion that it's really whenever I'm talking, even though it's obviously over a virtual platform, and I know for a fact that like we're going to meet up when we can, when the circumstances would allow it. But it's just, it's that feeling of release, it's that feeling of catharsis, it's that feeling of, wow, these people love me and embrace me for who I am. And it's the feeling of also learning more about myself through talking to you guys, you know, because you always feel like you know yourself. But when you're surrounded by the right people, family, friends, partners, whatnot, I think you learn and grow each and every day. So thank you guys for that. And I also want to conclude by saying that Science Walden, the project or the center that's supporting this, is it's initiated from Korea. And for me, and Science Walden is a convergence project, which in a nutshell tries to converge different disciplines, so natural sciences, engineering, humanities, and the arts. And something like this you don't often see that in academia, because academia is very rigid and linear in terms of what fields you go into. You go into that field and you build a tent around it and you stay in that. But Science Walden really is trying to revolutionize that even in academia. So I really want to say thank you to all the Science Walden team members, and of course the head of Science Walden, Professor Cho. And for me, this has been a conversion project, not only of disciplines, but of my life. You know why? Because Korea has been one of the leading countries when it comes to the conversations regarding UBI, and this project was initiated in Korea and supported by the Korean government, and I am from Korea, and India is a place that's hosting Auroville. Auroville wouldn't exist without India, and I'm also giving back to Auroville, and I'm hoping that if the Aura platform succeeds to an extent, I'm hoping that we can take it to more different educational centers in India. So let's say college campuses that are big enough, like where it's like a little community themselves, or even boarding schools, international boarding schools in India. So that's one way that I would like to give back to India and Auroville. And for me, also just Germany has been a place that like taught me so much. It's the place where I got in touch with technology, because Ayesha, you know this about Germans. They are such good engineers, and they really have a knack for these things. And you get inspired. By people who are so good at what they do. So for me, it's like I wouldn't be able to have such a curiosity for technology and its potentialities if it weren't for Germany. So for me, this is all a summary of my life coming together and converging into one point, especially having this conversation with you both. So you guys, this really means a lot to me. And I know it's been a long one, but I hope that if we divide it into two pieces, people would have, I don't know, endured through this conversation. Yeah. So thank you guys. Yeah.
Thank you guys. I love you both.
I love you both too.
Always inspiring me, Danvi, and Sas as well. Thank you both.
Yes, you guys really inspire me. I think what we'll do is in a few months' time, we will have we'll have like a part 2 to this conversation. And I think it'll be really interesting at that point also, Seth, for you to share your perspectives on how this has been adopted. Also, Ayesha, she's planning on returning to Auroville in the near future. So then it will have, I think, a lot even more to talk about at that point.
Yeah, and opinions change all the time. So who knows what will happen, what we'll think, what we'll realize, what we'll learn. So for sure, guys. So on Aura Talks, we conclude each episode by saying ciao for now. So ciao for now.
So yeah, we'll do it on 3. So I did it in Tamil last time. So this time I'll do it in German. 3, 2, 1. Ciao for now.
Aura, the value we create together.